How much did you pay in federal taxes in 2020? I bet you paid a fair bit of your income. I know I did. Well, we now know the former president of the United States, a self-proclaimed billionaire, paid $0 in federal income taxes in 2020. In fact, Donald J. Trump claimed a refund of more than $5 million. That's part of what we learned this morning from the House Ways and Means Committee, which made 6 years of Trump's actual tax returns from 2015 to 2020 public, giving us an unprecedented, long-awaited view into his finances. And here's what almost immediately stood out to me. Donald Trump made zero charitable contributions, charitable donations in 2020, despite pledging to give away his government salary. He earned income from more than a dozen countries during his time in office. He also had several foreign bank accounts throughout his time in the White House, including one in communist China, which he claimed he had shut down. And the returns also show that Trump, the man who wanted to make America great again, paid more in foreign taxes than in U.S. federal income taxes in 2017, the first year of his presidency. Trump's taxes were finally released after he fought for years to keep them secret. There were multiple appeals all the way up to the Supreme Court. Yet he repeatedly promised to release them while falsely claiming he couldn't do so because they were under audit. During a 2020 presidential debate, he was asked directly about how much taxes he'd paid. Here's how he responded.
Mr. President, I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not 750.
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it.
Today, Trump issued a statement responding to the release of his tax returns. Quote, the Democrats should never have done it. The Supreme Court should never have approved it, and it's going to lead to horrible things for so many people. The radical left Democrats have weaponized everything. But remember, that is a dangerous two-way street. Of course, this is all happening as Republicans are days away from taking over the House of Representatives. And today, Kevin Brady, the Republican ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee, issued a similar warning to Trump, saying, in part, in the long run, Democrats will come to regret it. Will they? Let's talk to one of the Democratic members of the House Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania, who joins me now. Congressman, thanks for coming on the show. I know it took a long time to get to this point, to get these returns out in front of the American people. What is the most important thing you want Americans to know about, to see in these tax returns from the former president?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. This was the culmination of a 4-year fight in the courts. Donald Trump did everything he possibly could to prevent us and the American people from seeing what was in these returns. But ultimately, fortunately, he lost. And now the American people can see some of what he was hiding. The fact he paid zero in taxes in 2020, only about $750 2 of the other previous years. All told, over the last 6 years, he paid an effective tax rate of 4%. Most working class and middle class constituents of mine here in Philadelphia pay 4, 5, 6, 7 times that amount in terms of a tax rate. So there are many takeaways, many things that have to actually be followed up on after the release of these returns. But there's one thing that comes across quite clear, is that there's one tax system for most of us who are wage earners and get our income mostly through a paycheck. And then there's a different set of rules for the wealthiest 1/10 or 1/100th of 1%. And they actually, despite having more money, get a lot less scrutiny or even no scrutiny at all than most working Americans.
Congressman, you mentioned a moment ago there's a lot more things to follow up on. Obviously, your committee will not be controlled by Democrats in a few days' time when the Republicans take over and take the majority. Who's going to do the following up? Will it be the Senate Finance Committee, which is still run by Democrats? Where is this going to go? A lot of people would say you guys took too long to get to this point. You started in, 2019 in terms of making the requests. You know, time's run out now for Democrats in the House.
Yeah, so, first we started in 2019 because that's when Democrats took over the House. The Republicans, as they have demonstrated clearly throughout the Trump presidency and afterwards, have absolutely no interest in holding Donald Trump responsible. We took over in early 2019 and then shortly thereafter made this initial request to the IRS. But speaking of the IRS, that's the most obvious place where Donald Trump and frankly all Americans should be held accountable for following tax laws. One of the things that has now been demonstrated is that the IRS was not following its own rules. The IRS is charged, and again, these are their own rules, with auditing the tax returns of every single president every year. They were not doing that in 2017 or in 2018. They didn't start in 2019 until literally the day they received the letter from the Ways and Means Committee. So the IRS needs to follow up on this and actually conduct real audits of the former president.
And your colleague, the ranking Republican on the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Kevin Brady, he said this week, well, have a listen to what he said.
Going forward, the majority chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee will have nearly unlimited power to target and make public the tax returns of private citizens. And not just private citizens, political enemies, business and labor leaders, or even the returns of Supreme Court justices themselves.
Congressman, he makes it sound like a bad thing. I, for one, would be happy to see the tax returns of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and others.
You took the words out of my mouth. I actually think the tax returns of the Supreme Court justices should be public. I think that's in the public interest. But put that aside for a second. His main claim that suddenly now every future Ways and Means Committee is going to be able on a whim to get the tax returns of political enemies and release them, those are crocodile tears. Remember, it took us 4 years in the courts to be able to do this. Ultimately, a Republican-dominated Supreme Court found in our favor. And the reason why they found in our favor is because we were able to demonstrate that we had a legitimate legislative purpose in this pursuit. So the idea that anyone of either party moving forward will be able to, on a whim for political reasons, get tax returns of an ordinary citizen and release them, it's just not so.
One last question for you, Congressman, and I plan to ask this question all night long to all of my guests, but let me start with you because we just mentioned a moment ago that Republicans are going to be controlling the House in a few days. Will Kevin McCarthy be in charge of those Republicans? Do you think he's ever going to actually get the Speaker's gavel?
I don't think that anyone is really in charge over on the House Republican side, regardless of who they may elect as Speaker. It really shows the contrast between the two parties. We had exactly the same number, 222, a majority of only 5, that Republicans have incoming on January 3rd. We were able to just have a session in Congress in which we didn't get everything I wanted, but we literally had the most historic legislation passed since the 1965-66 Congress. Meanwhile, on the other side, they can't even elect their own speaker. That's how much of a clown car the Republican side is. So I happen to believe Kevin McCarthy is going to have real difficulty getting to the magic number of 218 on swearing-in day. We might actually go to multiple rounds, which would be the first time in a century. I will be there with my popcorn, enjoying watching the Republican dysfunction.